In the news tonight, the President of the Republic of Montenegro, Filip Vujanovic, and his spouse begin an official visit to the kingdom, which will include talks with His Majesty the King and other Jordanian officials. The United Nations envoy for Syria, Lakhdar Brahimi, holds a news conference in Tehran and says it is necessary and fruitful for Iran to attend the Geneva II conference. And Saudi women activists take to the streets defying men-only road rules and post videos on the social media of themselves driving. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. President of the Republic of Montenegro, Filip Vujanovic, and his spouse began an official visit to the kingdom this afternoon. During his stay in Jordan, President Vujanovic will hold talks with His Majesty the King on ways of promoting bilateral relations, as well as a number of regional and international issues. He will also meet with a number of senior Jordanian officials. Upon arrival in Amman, President Vujanovic and his wife were welcomed by Minister of Water and Irrigation Hazem al-Nasser and other officials. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas made a stopover in Amman following a European tour, during which he met with Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriate Affairs Nasser Joudeh to discuss latest developments in Palestinian-Israeli peace negotiations. Abbas said the Palestinian side is committed to the negotiations timeframe set by the United States. Joudeh conveyed His Majesty the King's good wishes to Abbas and reiterated Jordan's support to the Palestinians in their negotiations of final status issues. He reiterated Jordan's backing of efforts to reach a two-state solution that guarantees the establishment of a sovereign and independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. Her Majesty Queen Rania sits with Al Arabiya Network primetime anchor Muntaha Ramahi in an exclusive interview, part of which will be aired tomorrow. Speaking from home, Her Majesty tackles some of the Arab region's most pressing challenges, from the urgent need for education reform and women's empowerment to youth unemployment and rising violence and polarization. The two-part interview covers a wide range of issues, including the transition to democracy in the Arab world and the Jordanian reform model. Part 1 of the interview will air on Al Arabiya at 7 p.m. GMT tomorrow, 10 p.m. Jordan local time, followed by Part 2 on Monday at the same time. The United Nations Peace Envoy for Syria, Lakhdar Brahimi, is saying that Tehran should be invited to plan peace talks in Geneva aimed at ending the Syrian conflict. Speaking at a news conference in Tehran, Brahimi voiced hope that Iran would be invited to the Geneva conference, saying their participation is natural and necessary, as well as fruitful. He told reporters that the UN Secretary General, among other people, are waiting for that invitation and would like to see Iran take part in the conference. Speaking at the same news conference with Brahimi, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said Tehran would take part in the Geneva conference if invited. He said Iran's aim would be to come up with a political solution by providing the possibility for various Syrian sides to negotiate with each other. The date of the conference is still a controversial issue, with the Arab League Secretary General saying it will be held on the 23rd of November, while the United States and Russia say no date has yet been officially set.
Well, the
problem in Syria is further complicated, and various sides are being involved. And the difference has come to a stage where the Syrians are unable to sit down and negotiate with each other. That is why they need assistance so that they could be put together at a negotiating table and to be able to speak regarding what needs to happen to come to a solution. The best person to help is actually the neighbors and their brothers in the region.
In Saudi Arabia, where there's a ban on women drivers, a campaign against men-only road rules is calling on women to take to the streets. A few of the women participants in the campaign defied government warnings of arrest and prosecution and took to the streets today and filmed themselves driving. Videos were published on the Women Driving Campaign's YouTube feed and Twitter. purporting to show women driving in Riyadh and Jeddah. Organizers say their call for women to drive was not a political protest, as they had not called for gatherings, rallies, or processions of cars. Men, for the most part, are against the idea and give different reasons, one of which is that the country already suffers traffic jams. Women activists say the ban disrupts their lives and believe it is safer to drive themselves than be driven by a driver who is usually a stranger or a foreigner.
We are in the Najah street. I'm going to take my sisters to do some of their work instead of waiting for the driver or someone else to take them. They will be delayed, so we decided to do our work by ourselves. I drive carefully and I can drive very well. There's no danger on us, God willing.
Over to Syria, and on the ground, amateur video posted on the internet showed armed rebel fighters clashing with government forces in the Damascus suburb of Western Ghouta. The video showed rebel fighters opening fire and using rocket-propelled grenades against Syrian government forces in the suburb. In other videos said to be filmed yesterday, government war jets launched rocket attacks on the town of Saraqib in Idlib province and in Der'a. The videos showed explosions and heavy smoke and wounded people being carried to vehicles. Elsewhere, Kurdish militants seized a Syrian border post on the frontier with Iraq early today after 3 days of clashes with an al-Qaeda-linked group which had held the crossing since March. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the Ya'rubiya post and surrounding areas in the northeast were taken from Iraq and the Levant rebel group who had seized it from the army. U.S. President Barack Obama promised that his troubled healthcare website is just weeks away from a cure as he struggled to convince Americans he is on top of what has become a self-inflicted wound to his signature first-term achievement. The U.S. administration yesterday unveiled a plan to make Obamacare insurance marketplaces on a website riddled with error messages, long delays, and bugs. Here's the story.
That the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Now that order has been restored in the House, U.S. President Barack Obama has a wound to mend, getting his signature Healthcare Act to work online, which he promised Americans to have up and running October 1st.
But as you may have heard, the site isn't working the way it's supposed to yet. It's frustrating for all of us who've worked so hard to make sure everyone who needs it gets health care. And that's why, in the coming weeks, we are going to get it working as smoothly as it's supposed to.
The president has come under fire for launching a website full of error messages. Republican opponents to the Affordable Care Act in the House tried to derail its implementation for 1 year, which led to a historic 16-day government shutdown.
Now, some people have poked fun at me this week for sounding like an insurance salesman, and that's okay. I'd still be out there championing this law even if the website were perfect.
Whether or not healthcare.gov can make a speedy recovery by the end of November is a work in progress. In the meantime, opponents to the plan keep adding salt to the wound.
We stay with the United States, and critics of the U.S. National Security Agency's surveillance program gathered in Washington, D.C. to demand a stop to government spying. Thousands of Americans converged on the National Mall where Stop Watching Us, a coalition of more than 100 different groups, gathered in what it touts as the largest anti-surveillance demonstration in U.S. history. Joining the demonstration also are activists from across the political spectrum. The demonstrators held placards that read "Stop Mass Surveillance" and "Stop Mass Spying." The ongoing revelations, which now suggest NSA ears extended even to the German Chancellor's personal mobile and to as many as 35 other heads of state, won condemnation at the EU summit in Brussels yesterday. Sicily's Mount Etna, Europe's tallest and most active volcano, sent streams of red-hot lava and ash plumes into the sky as it erupted overnight. Since yesterday, some 15 small earthquakes that caused the eruptions were detected on the Etna. While there were no reports of damage or evacuations in the area, air traffic at a nearby airport was disrupted and flights were delayed. This is the 14th time this year that Etna has erupted. With Halloween just around the corner, more than 700 children under the age of 6 with their parents took part in one of the largest children's Halloween parades in the Japanese city of Kawasaki. They were dressed as their favorite superheroes and storybook characters. While classic witch, Dracula and pirate costumes were donned for the event, pretty princesses were outnumbered by the character of Alice in Wonderland. The Kawasaki Kids Halloween Parade is an annual event with up to 1,000 participants walking a 40-minute course through the streets of the city. And the first Clásico of the season went to Barcelona after they beat Real Madrid 2-1 in a match at the Nou Camp. Neymar couldn't have dreamt of a better start to his Clásico appearance, as the Brazilian striker has put Barcelona ahead 1-0 in the 18th minute. Alexis Sanchez, with a beautiful chip shot from outside the area, gave Barca their second goal in the 78th minute. And just 2 minutes before the end of the game, Gisela Rodriguez gave Real their sole goal. Some 98,761 fans were at the Camp Nou for the Clásico. Three-times world champion Sebastian Vettel put himself on pole position for a fourth successive Formula One title after lapping the India Grand Prix circuit faster than any driver ever before. The German, with a lightning lap of 1 minute 29.119 seconds, will have compatriot Nico Rosberg alongside on the front row. Lewis Hamilton will line up third. The big loser was Romain Grosjean, who led the previous race in Japan but failed to get his Lotus through the first phase of qualifying. And finally, it'll be relatively cold tonight in most regions with northwesterly light to moderate winds. Tomorrow as well, fair weather continues to prevail in most regions with northwesterly light winds. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect relatively hot conditions with northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. President of the Republic of Montenegro, Filip Vujanovic, and his spouse begin an official visit to the kingdom, which will include talks with His Majesty the King and other Jordanian officials. The United Nations envoy for Syria, Lakhdar Brahimi, holds a news conference in Tehran and says it is necessary and fruitful for Iran to attend the Geneva II conference. And Saudi women activists take to the streets, defying men-only road rules, and post videos on the social media of themselves driving. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.